Charles City County, Ms. Adams,
Here.
Mr. Mitchell. Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Going.
Here.
Hanover County, Chair Vidunas.
Here.
Henrico County, Ms. Smidler.
Here.
Mr. Yor. New Kent County, Ms. Inman.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Powhatan County, Mr. Shardine. City of Richmond, Ms. Clark. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Mr. Wagner. GRTC, Ms. Robinson.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Thank you. Plan RBA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
Mr. Ariel.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Simmons. Right Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Here.
VDOT, Ms. Rhodes.
Here. Good morning.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the election of officers for FY 25. Dorona Moore and Dorona Moore Clark and Sherry Adams are on the slate. Dorona is engaged in another activity this morning. She's going to be joining us a little bit later, and ask that we defer action on this particular item until she rejoins us. I can't recall exactly when she might join in, but why don't we move it to right after item 11, just before the transportation agency updates. And hopefully by that time, Dorona has joined in. So I guess we kind of jumped ahead. That was an amendment to the meeting agenda. Are there any other suggested adjustments to the meeting agenda? Okay, great. The next item is approval of the June 11th, 2024 TAC meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review those. Are there any changes or amendments to the meeting minutes? I do have one small thing for clarification. On the minutes, we list the attendance and we place an X beside a name, and it's not clear exactly if the X indicates that person is absent or that person is present. So maybe just a notation indicating the X equals present. I believe that's the case, that the X does equal present by the name.
It is, but I can change it and put a P to indicate that they're present. I'll put a little guide at the top to let everybody know.
Or just, yeah, or the X is fine, and do what you would like, but the X is fine, just a notation somewhere that says X equals present would be it. Thank you very much. Everything else is perfect.
Sure.
So with that, we can handle this by a voice vote. So all in favor of approval of the meeting minutes, say aye.
Chair Vidunas, I don't have
We
a
need a
motion.
motion. Okay, I'm sorry. We need a motion in a second before we can take a vote.
I'll make a
Sean
motion.
O'Keefe, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll abstain. The minutes are accurate, but I was absent.
Okay. So noted. All right, moving along. Item 6 is opportunity for public comment. Do we have anybody wishing to speak?
We have not received any requests.
Okay. TAC Chairman's report. Just kind of one brief announcement. We are advertising for a capital project specialist in our transportation section. So if you know somebody, or if you happen to be have interest in that position, just be noted. It's be overseeing development of a number of our roadway improvement projects. That's all I have as far as the TAC chairman's report. Kind of moving into the meat of the agenda, we'll begin. Ainsley's going to kick things off with tip amendment. Item A, traffic and safety operations. Sorry. Go ahead, Ainsley.
All right, let me just get my screen up. Okay. Good morning, all. Let's see. Give me 1 second. There it goes. Okay. Good morning, all. The first tip amendment we are bringing to you today concerns a project concerning grouping and maintenance in the traffic and safety operations category. Why is that not changing? Forgive me, give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so we are all familiar with the TIPS function as a planning document for investment in federal obligations, but we might be a little less familiar with project groupings. So project groupings are simply pots of funds for similar types of projects that do not impact air quality or significantly impact the capacity of regional transportation networks. Grouping projects allows for additional flexibility in implementation, as amendments are generally only needed if the total funding for the project grouping changes significantly. So the project grouping that we are bringing today is being requested by VDOT, and that will add, whoops, there we go. No, that's not right. Okay, and that will add $6,750,000 to the maintenance, safety, and operations project grouping in federal fiscal year 2024. This funding is provided through the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, and the STBG provides flexible funding for states and localities for projects that preserve and improve the condition and performance of any highway, bridge, or tunnel that receives federal aid, as well as projects on public roads, projects containing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and transit capital projects. So this is the tip block that we have, just showing the addition of the funds into FY24. And then the requested action, whoops. The requested action that we are asking of you today from the TAC is to approve this tip amendment to the policy board. And I would be happy to take any questions if anyone has them. Thank you so much.
Okay, any questions, comments? Okay, we'll need a motion in a second.
I'll move approve as presented.
Second. Barb.
Yes. Thank you, Austin and Barb with the second. Okay, we'll handle this by roll call vote.
All right. Give me 1 second. If you don't mind, Chair Vadunez, let me just double check. I think we may have had a member or two come in since I called the roll. I want to make sure I don't miss anyone.
Sure.
Okay. Charles City County, Miss Adams.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne.
Aye.
Hanover County, Chair Vadunez.
Aye.
Henrico County, Miss Smidler.
Aye.
New Kent County, Miss Inman.
Aye.
GRTC, Miss Robinson.
Aye.
Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Aye.
Ride Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Aye.
And VDOT, Miss Rhodes.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, so moving right along, Kelly is going to take the next item, which is another tip amendment regarding safe streets.
Hi, good morning. I am about to share my screen, so let me know if you can't see it. Everybody can see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm going to talk to you about a new project brought to us by Richmond. The staff report showed incorrect numbers, however, the tip block was correct, and a revised copy has been of the document has been included with today's agenda, I believe. So moving on to the background. Richmond seeks to add Safe Streets for All funding and associated projects to our four-year transportation improvement program. This new project requires an amendment because to go over fiscal constraint conformity review, public review, and RRTPO approval. Richmond has received funding from the Safe Streets for All projects. They are currently focused on several initiatives: better managing speed, improving accessible routes for all demographics, creating a comprehensive streetlight management plan, and conducting roadway safety assessments in a multidisciplinary approach. Richmond, this project grouping also supports projects under the Connect RVA 2045 as part of the constrained long-range plan, and it is located within a previously designated 8-hour ozone maintenance area. However, it is exempt because it's safety projects. Total funding is about $3.5 million. During the engineering phase, it will be $440,629 in fiscal year 24, and it will be $1,762,516. And then during the construction phase, the match will be $2,251,599 in fiscal year 25, and it will be $9,006,394 in fiscal year 25 as well. Requested action. We are requesting that the TAC recommends the proposed TIP amendment for approval as requested by Richmond. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns? Ms. Rhodes?
Yeah, I'll just note that this item and the next item are both the, again, direct recipient grants. So these are not the typical TIP amendment process. These are grants that would go direct to the locality, in this case, Richmond. So they need to be articulated in the TIP so that there's proof there in the TIP. But from here, VDOT will not be involved.
Miles.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight one other thing, kind of echoing Sarah's comment. In the TIP moving forward, you'll always see these listed as other funding, even though they're federal funds, because essentially once it's gone to the locality, it's being treated as local money coming back into the TIP. And that's the way we're putting them in. And just want to make sure that that's clear, because it doesn't say in here Safe Streets for All anywhere, but it is the Safe Streets for All funding.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll handle this by a voice vote as well. I mean, roll call vote. Oh, excuse me. We need a motion and second.
This is Barb. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the TIP amendment.
Karen Snyder, second.
Okay. Now, we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay. Miss Amos. We have Miss Amos with us now. I'll circle back and check with her on the chat. Miss Adams,
Aye.
Miss Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Goyne,
Aye.
Chair Dunez,
Aye.
Miss Smidler,
Aye.
Miss Inman,
Aye.
Miss Robinson,
Aye.
Mr. Bushing,
Aye.
Mr. O'Keefe,
Aye.
Miss Rhodes.
I too give a thumbs up.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Okay, excellent. Item 10, gonna flip it back over to Ainsley. Again, she's gonna give a description of the TIP amendment regarding the Arthur Ashe Boulevard Bridge replacement over CSX Railroad.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So the final TIP amendment we're bringing to you today concerns the creation of a new project that will rebuild the Arthur Ashe Boulevard Bridge that crosses the CSX Railroad. This project requires the TIP to be amended due to it being a new project with funds being added, and the City of Richmond is requesting this action. The City of Richmond was awarded a total of $18,400,000 through the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant. So the RAISE grant is a discretionary grant program that helps project sponsors at the state and local level complete critical freight and passenger transportation infrastructure projects. Of the total awarded, $1,360,000 is going to be added in federal fiscal year 2025 for the engineering phase, and then $17,040,000 will be added to federal fiscal year 27 for the construction phase, and the remaining balance will be funded through local funding. This project will rebuild the Arthur Ashe Boulevard Bridge that crosses over the CSX Railroad. However, the project will not add any capacity to the bridge, and as such, it will remain exempt from the air quality conformity analysis. So the tip block shows the addition of the $1,360,000 for the engineering in FY25 and the addition of $17,040,000 in FY27. And once again, we are asking that the TAC approve or recommend approve this tip amendment to the policy board, and I would be happy to take any questions if anyone has them. Thank you.
All right. Nicely done. Again, we'll need a motion in a second.
John,
I'll make a motion
I'll
to
make a
approve.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve this funding for DPW.
John O'Keefe, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Okay, Miss Amos. Miss Adams,
Aye.
Miss Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Goin,
Aye.
Chair Badunas,
Aye.
Miss Smidler,
Aye.
Miss Inman,
Aye.
Miss Robinson, Mr. Bushing,
Aye.
Mr. O'Keefe,
Aye.
Miss Rhodes.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Okay, moving right along, we are at item 11. Sulab, the floor is yours to provide a scenario planning overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the TAC. I'm going to present you. Before that, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to present you about the pathways to the future, which is the scenario planning process for the Richmond region. We have been working on this project for the last 2 years. So before we go into much more detail, I just wanted to give a brief about what scenario planning is. So scenario planning is basically a strategic planning approach to develop, compare, and test different scenarios. Scenarios are plausible alternative futures in response to the shift in external forces, which I would say are beyond our control, or the consequences of deliberate policy changes, which are somehow within our control. We are all familiar with visioning. It is, we could consider it as one type of scenario planning, but the focus of any visioning process is the end states of the process rather than the outcome that the external forces might provide us with uncertainty. So in US, scenario planning have been applied in various sectors. As we can see, some of the sectors listed on the size, new business plans, military exercises, financial investment. But as transportation and planning professionals, our focus is how scenario planning is particularly being applied in community planning and transportation. So Plan RVA has been trying to do scenario planning for a long time. So to do that, we started the process around 2014 when we collaborated with Federal Highway to sponsor a scenario planning pair exchange, which was hosted in Plan RVA. So we did that. We had a 2-day training session from Federal Highway. I think some of you attended that. I was in that exchange as well. After that, we participated in a scenario planning peer exchange, again sponsored by Federal Highway, and this time it was done in Hampton Roads. So we presented there about our experience in the peer exchange and how we anticipate to use scenario planning in the future. We also have been a member or consortium of scenario planning, which is a national level organization. We also hosted the consortium's scenario planning workshop in 2019 at Plan RV. Some of you, again, were present at that meeting. We initially thought that we would use scenario planning as kind of an academic exercise in our last long-range transportation plan, Connect RVA 2045, just using the scenario planning for transportation, but things didn't materialize at that time because of timing issues. So once the plan was done, we thought, why not develop a comprehensive exploratory scenario planning, not just for transportation, but for all planning realms. And that we started that process and call it the Pathways of Future, which we started around 2022, which I'm presenting now. So we want to do scenario planning, but what does the code say? So the Code of Federal Regulation recommends scenario planning. It's not mandatory, but it recommends scenario planning in long-range planning process. So there are three main approaches of scenario planning. The first one is the predictive scenario planning, in which we respond to probable trends, like based on what we see in the future, trends like change in special distribution of population growth or lower transportation finance revenue, those kind of things which we can predict as we see now from the data which we have now. That's called the predictive scenario planning. It could be many scenarios or it could be just one scenario. This is what we have always done in our long-range planning. So we could say that this is the trend line, the expected, the probable, or the baseline. And the main question what we are answering here is, what would it be in the future? Then the normative scenario planning was developed. This is a second kind of scenario planning in which we try to depict desirable future conditions. So it's the end state, preferred or prescriptive, or we can call is the we might do 3 or 4 depending upon how many scenarios, and then we choose one scenario which would be the preferred scenario. So the visioning process which we talked about, that's a normative scenario planning process. And the key question it answers is what we want to be. And then the final scenario planning approach is the exploratory scenario planning process, in which we respond to uncontrollable or unknown future conditions. So the main question which we answer in this type of scenario planning is, what could it be? So predictive is something which nobody does these days, but the other two, the primary purpose of the normative scenario planning is to reach specific target, whereas the primary purpose of the exploratory scenario planning is to navigate uncertainty. And for our purpose, Pathways of Future, we chose the exploratory scenario planning process. So why exploratory scenario planning process? So normally, as I mentioned earlier, we normally predict the future from the past. So as we all know, long-range planning uses a lot of data, and it uses the data from the past to identify what might be the basis for predicting the future. So child is the father of the man. So as the present is the outcome of the future would be definitely the outcome of the present. That's what we normally think. So what if the trends are uncertain? So, the future is uncertain. And when trends become unpredictable, it threatens to alter future trends. And it is wise to consider exploratory scenario planning in that process. So the primary purpose is to be prepared. It's like a defensive playbook in which, like an opponent offense, we think ahead of time what might happen and envision our actions in each scenarios. Those insights then inform our policies and investment strategies. So the pathways to the future framework, it's basically we start with what the reason is now. We develop what we call as the forces of future or drivers or disruptors, which I'll discuss in detail. And then we develop different scenarios. We develop 4. And then we model those scenarios. And then we take the outcome of those scenarios. And based on those outcomes, we try to develop informed decisions for the future. So this is the main framework which we have worked with. This gives you a little bit detail on the process flow of the pathways of the future process. So we have divided this process into 4 phases. So the pathways to the future covers the first 3 phases. So the first phase is the development of baseline data and model tools. So it's a very quantitative approach which we used. So we have to develop a lot of data and models. So we developed, obviously we have the baseline data, we develop different models and tools. We have to develop, again, once we have the models, we need to develop data to populate those models. And since we have a lot of models, they need to talk with each other. We need to couple those models so that they give meaningful outcomes. The second phase is the scenarios development, actually. The policy was briefed on that. We established a scenario planning advisory committee, which I will talk about later. Then we identify the future disruptors or drivers, as I mentioned previously. We develop the performance measures or indicators to which we would evaluate scenarios, and then we actually develop the scenario narratives. The phase 3 is basically the testing, analysis, and communication of those scenarios. So we run those scenarios and then we refine that so they give us good outputs. We evaluate the scenarios. We develop the data. We try to disseminate the data in a digestible manner so that everybody can understand that. And then we get the approval from the policy board. The phase 4, which is application within different program areas of Plan RVA, that is something which we anticipate to do once this process is done. So there are 3 levels of applicability. One is education and awareness. The second one is strategic direction, in which we actually use these scenarios to define visioning or explanation. As I mentioned, visioning is a normative process, but if we have many scenarios, we'll call it explorations to those scenarios rather than visioning. And then third is the actual action identification. Basically, this process drives policy decisions. Scenario planning advisory committee, the process was guided by a scenario planning advisory committee. The SPAC was made of 17 members, and it included regional and national experts in the field of transportation, land use, community development, environment, emergency management, housing, energy, economic development, and community health. So we try to make sure that we include all sectors, not just transportation. But as you can see, we have a few of the TAC members as well as CTAC members included in this process as well. The schedule of this process, as I mentioned, it's roughly a 2-year process. We started late in 2022. We had 6 SPAC meetings. Different SPAC meetings have different agenda. So basically reviewing the drivers, scenario frameworks, and then we define the scenario narratives, the modeling matrices, model results, and then finally scenario implications. Within those 2, we also had those processes, the 6 meetings, we had 2 phases of public engagement. So the first one was exploring the future. So we discussed about the scenario narratives, the drivers, and how we could save the region. included MetroQuest survey as well as RET. The second engagement was once we developed the scenario, it was basically called the Preparing for the Future, in which we reviewed the scenarios as well as the results. This also included a MetroQuest survey as well as a SRET. So as you can see now, it's July 2024, and I'm presenting to the TAC. I'm not asking for any approval today. It's just a discussion meeting. However, I'll be asking for TAC's approval in the next meeting in August, and then we'll go for the policy board for its approval in September. So we start with the baseline data. As you can see, we developed the baseline data, which is basically the 2050 socioeconomic data. It was a long 1.5-year process to develop this data, and it was approved by the RRTPO Policy Board last year in July 6th. So the baseline shows that information that most of our localities are growing, both in employment and population. The overall regional growth from 2017 to 2050 is 34%, which is higher than the Virginia average, I would say. And employment is 30%. And if we compare to Hampton Roads region, I think the employment is around 10% within that same time frame, and population is 17%. So we are doing pretty good. This is a pretty moderate growth. It's a very conservative approach that we have used in developing the baseline data. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the scenario planning process is a very quantitative process. So we developed a suite of predictive models so that we can evaluate the outcomes of the different scenarios. So some of these tools, we already had it developed in Planario. Some of them we developed explicitly for the process. Some of them are like a pretty complicated models. Some of them are pretty simple models. So basically, as I mentioned, we start from the base year 2017. We have developed the 2050 horizon year baseline data, which was approved by the policy board. And then we play with that data. We have developed what we call as a simple land use allocation model, Richmond Simple Land Use Allocation Model, RSLAM. It basically allocates the growth as we suggested as directions given to that model. So that is the key model which we use for all different downstream models. As you all know, we have the RTC travel demand model, which we have always used. It's also related with the mobile emission models based on the EPA MOVES model. It was also used in the long-range transportation planning process. We have a transportation accessibility model also embedded with the travel demand model, which we use for project scoring in long-range transportation plan as well as CBTA processes. So those models were already there. Then we developed a few simple models like the building emission and energy model, which basically looks at the relationship with land use and the emissions and energy coming out from different households. Similarly, water consumption model, simple Excel model based on the change in land use. It basically predicts the changes in energy and water consumption. System resiliency model is something which we developed in-house. It basically looks at the different future risk areas which might be there and how it would differ in different scenarios. So we looked at basically 3 things: sea level rise, the water flooding areas and dam bridges, as well as wildfire-prone areas in the Richmond region. And then basically it tells you what is the affected acreage of land based on different scenarios, how many people would be affected, how many households would be affected, and how many jobs would be affected based on those different risk areas in different scenarios. We also developed a land cover model, which is basically to find out the impervious surface based on different scenarios, which gives us the pollutant runoff loading model to tie in our environmental program. And then we also develop a little bit complicated model, the economic model, all those major outputs, the energy usage, the water consumption, the hours of delay, the access to jobs and destination, all those goes into the economic model to calculate what is the different economic benefit for different models. And then finally, most of these outcomes goes into what we call as a community health impact model, which gives us the a health score. So this, if anybody is interested in learning much more about the model, we are also developing a technical documentation, which we can share with you, or we can talk offline as well. So I talked about the drivers, or we can call it disruptors, or the forces of future change, which would have impacts in the scenarios. We develop these drivers into 4 buckets of community, technology, economy, and resiliency. So the initial list came with staff and consultants developing it. It was further refined by the SPAC members, and we also took the comments from the thread as well as the public comment from the surveys. So basically, under each bucket, we have a sub bucket as well. And I'm not going into all of those, but basically, we can see under community, we have population dynamics, which talks about the overall growth in the region, the age, as we know, the household, the pyramid, age structure pyramid is changing, household size, it's decreasing, household composition, we have like single family, non-related households, as non-related people living in household as well, education, migration, and immigration, those play a major role, and then climate migration, which might be a thing in the future as well. Similarly, we have settlement demand dynamics, settlements supply dynamics, political dynamics. In technology, we talk about transportation technology dynamics, like the connected and automated vehicles, which might change the dynamics of transportation systems, e-vehicles, mobility as a service, automated freight, parking management technology, those kind of things, transportation mode shift, micro-mobility, that's a very much thing in the region right now, high-speed rail from Richmond to DC, maybe VRE from Richmond to DC if we have a lot of people working in DC, who knows. And then other technological dynamics as well, broadband, which is important, 3D printing, and the most important thing now is artificial intelligence. We all know about ChatGPT. Then we have the economics, global national economic dynamics, economic growth, decline, different sectors are growing, different sectors are increasing, as we all know, government investments. Then we have the local as well as regional economic dynamics as well. And then finally, the final bucket is resiliency, the climate, planet dynamics, which we don't have much of a control in, sea level rising, flooding, pandemic like COVID-19, and then we have something which we could respond to, like the policy dynamics, clean energy, clean transportation, which is very much regional, local, and even national. And then we have local dynamics, like local resiliency, recycling, water consumption, those kind of things. So all these drivers were taken into considerations. Then we started the public engagement phase 1, which is basically was to make aware the public what exploratory scenario planning is and why it is useful. And the objective was basically to get information from the public so that we can develop the scenario narratives. So we first thing we did was the thread. It was an invitation-only event in which we invited the subject matter expert and regional leaders in the region. I think around 50 people attended the first thread. Basically, we did a SWOT-like approach to access regional futures. We did the strength and the weaknesses. So basically discussed about the strength and the weaknesses for the current condition, which was 2023. We did it last year. And then basically also talk about the opportunities and threats for the region, which is basically for the future, 2024. We also did a MetroQuest survey in a less digestive format so that it's understandable by the public, and basically wanted to get what the public's future concerns and hopes were for the reason. We also did a stakeholder engagement in which we basically shared our presentation to the SPAC members who would then share the information with others. So as I mentioned earlier, the threat was invitation only, and the main aim was to do a SWOT analysis and list the strength and the weaknesses from 2023, which is the current, into the 4 buckets of drivers: community, technology, economy, resiliency. And the same thing for 2050, basically to identify opportunities and threats, again, on the 4 buckets. And here is the outcome. I won't go into all of those, but I will talk about the major themes. So in the opportunities, there is a room for regional growth and growth potential for diversity in the region and connectivity in the region. The region is very supportive to embrace new technology like connected and automated vehicles, automation, those kind of things. There's a lot of flexibility for employment in the region, and we encourage and attract new employment in the region. The region is also very adaptive to resilient growth and practices. So that was the major theme which came out for 2023 as opportunities. For threats, we can summarize it like this. So there is some lack of community and cooperation within the region. There is a very real crisis of housing affordability. And as we all know, there's a wealth disparity in the region. The technology, we are very keen in adopting technology, but there is an inequitable adoption of technology in the region. For economy, there's a lack of diverse jobs. We might have underemployment because of remote job or AI taking jobs or automation taking a lot of jobs. That's a very much real threat for the future. And then climate impact, which is mostly beyond our control. We have unresilient response to, I wouldn't say we might have unresilient response to environmental threats. So that's the thing we heard from the threat. Similarly, we did a public survey based on MetroQuest. We had a little bit less than 500 participants. And so we are summarizing the responses into concerns and hopes. So the major concerns are the population growth in the region. Again, similar thing as we saw in the threat. Housing affordability, which is very real. Artificial intelligence. Economic growth. Decline in urban sprawl, and then habitat loss, and then climate change. The hopes are that we might have the availability of affordable housing in the future. We would use, we are very approachable to technological advancement, but we would use safe technological advance, not everything. That we would have abundant economic opportunities, sustainable policies, as well as proactive environmental thinking. That's what the major summary we could summarize as what we heard from the public survey. So based on all those information, we developed a scenario narrative. So to create a range of plausible scenarios, so we want to create scenario which is plausible, which might really happen in the future. We apply different assumptions about the driving forces of change, and then we organize them. So in the graphics, you can see that population, it could be high, it could be low, it could be anywhere in the middle. Similarly, economy, it could be high economic growth, reduction in economic growth. Development, we could build to a major extent, we can conserve. Climate, and that's beyond our control. It could be extreme, it could be stable. So, and then we would do a lot of iteration based on all these approaches, the 4 buckets of technology advances, climate resiliency, community values, and economic changes. So based on a lot of iterations, we initially developed 3 scenarios, which was drafted by the staff team as well as the consultant team. They were presented to the SPAC, and then they were further refined from the consultant team as well, from the input from the SRET, as well as from the MetroQuest surveys. And then we finally came up with the 3 initial scenarios plus the baseline, as well as one dystopic kind of scenario for the Richmond region. So we basically came up with 5 scenarios, and each scenario has its own, I would say, a picture, a logo, which basically says what the growth would be like, and a color as well. So the baseline is basically what we developed in the socioeconomic data. It is, so we can summarize it as most growth is happening in suburban areas in the region. There is a densification approach in the regional urban core as well. So the trends and the settlements are basically based on locality adopting comprehensive plan. So that's what the baseline is. And we would say that it's a medium growth. As I said, the growth is 34% in population and 30% in employment. That's still conservative, and we are considering that at a medium growth. The Back to Future, as the name suggests, it's basically growth happening in the suburban and rural areas, mostly single-family housing, very car-centric, like 1950s, 60s housing development, and very reactive responses to global changes. And it's a high-growth scenario. The growth is around 60% of what it was in 2017. So the change is 60% higher than the baseline was 34%. So it's around 60%. Then we have the ecotopia, which is basically dense housing. We have a lot of climate refugees from Virginia shore areas coming to the Richmond region, more transportation choices, low on carbon footprint, more dense development, and very proactive response to global changes. Again, it's a high growth scenario, around the same with ecotopia, almost 60% growth as compared from 2017. So it's more than the baseline. And then we have May and Safe, which is a strange name taken from the slang. May is basically an expression for indifference. So it's basically a growth which is similar to baseline, but mostly in urban core areas and a lot of infill development. The responses to anything global or any change is very hyperlocal. And there is a mixed up proactive and reactive responses based on different localities. And it has a more transportation choices. Again, it differs in different localities than what is in the baseline. And then we have the final scenario, which is RVA sinks, which is a low growth scenario, which is lesser than the baseline. So it's still growing from 2017, but it is not reaching what we expect as the trend to reach in the baseline. So it's lesser than 34%. It's around like 17, 18% growth, but still growing from what it is now. So there's a lot of the scenario defines itself as having a lot of natural and man-made disasters, lack of affordable housing, global pandemic-like situation, and a lot of exodus of people leaving the region to other regions. So loss of jobs and people as well. So those are the 5 scenarios we developed. And I will be stopping now for this presentation. Next week, I'll be covering about the scenario details, the details about these 5 scenarios in response to all the different drivers, and then how we model these scenarios in our RSLAM model, and then specific downstream models. What were the modeling results? What are the performance measures coming out of different scenarios? And then we built something called as the indices. So we had almost like 70 performance measures coming out of these scenarios. So it's very hard for people to digest those. So we combined all these different performance measures into indices, and we have 8 or 9 indices, which I'll be discussing in the next. And then we'll also talk briefly about the application of this pathways to the future process in other planning areas, other plans which Plan RVA would anticipate to develop in future. And then again, I'll be asking for your approval of this process so that I can present this information to the policy board and get their blessing. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer now. Or if you need a little bit more detail on any of the quantitative process or any scenarios, any drivers, I could chat online, because this is a lot of work. It's a summary of what we did in last 2 years. And there was a lot of team of experts involved. So not only staff from RRTPO, the transportation staff in Plan RVA, we involved a lot of other staff from the environmental Plan RVA environmental team, as well as community development team. And we had a set of consultants, national expert in different fields, a group of consultants. So I would need everybody's help if you have any particular question, which I would want to answer. So with that, I leave you to any discussion or any questions. Thank you.
First off, Sulabh, that was an amazing presentation or summary to take all of that information and to consolidate it into 30 minutes. It was really impressive. Equally as impressive was the group. I was invited to be a participant, and quite frankly, I was really humbled to be part of that group. There were so many really bright, creative, articulate, as you said, national experts. I really didn't have much to offer, but it was really impressive to see, all the work that went into this and to see the outcomes. So Sulabh and the team at Plan RVA, Chet got things started, and Sulabh took the baton at that point when Chet took his position with CVTA. You guys have done a great job with this.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, so there's no action. Sulabh will be coming back. Is it next meeting for a recommendation?
Yeah, the next meeting on August would be the recommendation for approval.
Okay.
And I did send a process documentation report with the TAC. It's a very concise documentation of the process, around 30 pages. So if you haven't gone through it, please go through it. And I'm also developing what I would call it as a executive summary for our policy board, so that it's much more understandable by them. So I would try to get that to the TAC as well, but I can't promise that, but it'll definitely go to the policy board in September.
Great. Okay, well, thank you again. So during that, your update or briefing, I noticed that Dorona has now joined us. So Dorona, it worked out perfectly because we moved the item to select the next officers to lead us to follow this Sulabh's presentation. So now that you're here and Sherry is here, we're going to revert back to the election of the FY25 TAC officers. So I don't know if we need any discussion on this. What we do need is a motion and a second. I think just to keep things in order, Dorona Moore Clark from the city of Richmond would be next in line to serve as chair, and Sherry Adams with Charles City County would serve as vice chair during the next year. So motion and a second, please.
This is Sharon Smidler. And right now I make a motion for chair for the next fiscal year for Dorona Moore Clark, City of Richmond, and vice chair with new and Sherry Adams.
And I will wholeheartedly second that motion. So glad to pass the torch. And and right now, Dorona, you will be doing double duty, serving as the CVTA TAC chair, I guess, for at least a short while more. So thank you for that, because that's just a huge effort and on top of this as well. So thank you. I'm thanking you. We haven't taken a vote, but I think I know what the outcome's going to be. And we can do this by voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Is anybody abstain?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, Amy's going to abstain, and any nays? Okay. Thank you and congratulations. So Miles, do I step aside at this point?
It's up to you, Joe. You can finish out today's meeting since we're right at the end if you'd like.
I'll finish it out.
And I apologize, this is Sharon, if I said the wrong county in my head for Sherry Adams, I meant to say Charles City. If I didn't say the right county, I apologize.
I thought I heard Charles City, but maybe I didn't. Okay. Congrats to both of you. And moving now along to the transportation agency updates, beginning with DRPT. Is Tiffany here?
I don't believe she is here today. I think she's out of town.
Okay, well, then we'll forego the DRPT update and GRTC.
That would be me. All right, I'll kick it off with June was an excellent month for the GRTC, with the agency introducing new service along Brook Road to Reynolds Community College on Parham Road. And that is the extension of the Route 1. And also, last week we implemented a rerouting of the 1A to better service hospital-bound travelers in Chesterfield County. The launch of GRTC's 5th of 5 pilot link microtransit zones in Sandston and Elko was also a success. The new service immediately began carrying passengers, and the other link zones saw ridership continue to grow thanks to coordinated outreach and marketing campaign to promote our newest service. Also highlighted in June, GRTC passed 10 million riders for the fiscal year in only 11 months. This historic return to double-digit millions of riders demonstrates the success of both service improvements and fare-free transit access, factors that will allow GRTC to continue to grow as we focus on fiscal year 25. That focus includes both projects near and far, as background work begins on future schedule and route changes. The Essential Transit Infrastructure Program is re-energized with some consulting support. And a series of major projects surrounding the Pulse continue to advance, including station modification for articulated buses, which is slated to begin construction in late July, early August, depending on permitting. And lastly, on this Wednesday, GRTC is going to continue to celebrate our new service with a block party from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at St. Joseph's Villa. The combined celebration and community outreach event will allow riders to explore their new service, and more changes to come. And all are welcome to attend. And I believe that's it. So that concludes my agency update, and I can answer any questions anyone may have.
All right, thank you, Corey. Ride Finders, John, please.
Thank you, Chairman Badunas. Ride Finders did submit a grant extension request for the DRPT Commuter Assistance Program Carpool Incentive Program for our Kickstart Your Carpool. This grant extension was approved by DRPT in the Tri-Cities area. So we're also currently working on outreach events in the Tri-Cities area to promote this service of this pilot program. Ride Finders also did attend the Sandston Link ribbon cutting event, and we assisted GRTC with outreach in the Sandston zone to include all of our ride finder services as well when we were speaking with businesses in those area. We continued our series on why promote carpooling with Commander Carpool to encourage employers to provide carpooling options to enhance their workplace. This message was focused on boosting the employee satisfaction and reducing commuting stress by offering on-site customized carpooling matches via Ride Finder's matching system. We're continuing to work with Foursquare ITP on the Commuter Assistance Program strategic plan that should be wrapping up here in the next month or two. And we're continuing to gather the information needed for the accreditation pilot program through the Association for Commuter Transportation, where Ride Finders will be part of the TDM accreditation pilot. And with that, that's all I'll have, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And of course, last but not least, Sarah will give us a VDOT update.
Yes, good morning, everybody. During the month of June, the CTB met and had a pretty epic workshop and action agenda. Many items on those agendas. However, the major item I wanted to make you aware of is, of course, the 6-year improvement program has been approved. So we have an FY25 6-year improvement program is now in place. The next CTB meeting will be next week. Workshop is scheduled for July 16th, and the action meeting is scheduled for July 17th. Major takeaway from today from us is that we are 5 days.
Sarah, could you speak up? I can't hear you.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. My microphone was like near my chin and not my mouth. Sorry. The next steps, we are 5 days out from the readiness deadline for Smart Scale Round 6. So if you have pending readiness items, most applications, if not all, have their core readiness documentation has been put in the application, and many applications have been pre-approved by VDOT district review. However, if we are still missing things like design exception, design waivers, we are missing the SSO2 forms, which are the OIP forms for crosswalks that are not at signalized intersections. So please try and get those things done as soon as possible. Again, the deadline is July 15th, which is Monday at 5 o'clock. And then start to transition your thought processes to focusing on completion of the estimates, getting your governing body resolutions. Many of you already have MPO resolutions, which this MPO is already on top of that, and any other documentation related to leverage funding. If you are leveraging funding that cannot be shown in a some sort of board action or is not identified in an SYIP, we'll either need a local board action or a letter from somebody with authority committing to those leveraged funds. So all of that is still required, but that is due by the August 1st deadline, which is 5 p.m. August 1st, which I believe is a Thursday. So that's it from me. Thanks, guys. Joe, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate the updates from everybody. The next item is simply an information item. The Plan RVA newsletter is linked in your agenda package. Are there any, item 14, anybody from TAC wishes to have an announcement or make a comment or whatever? The floor is yours. Okay. The next meeting, chaired by Dorona Moore Clark, will be August 13th at 2024 at 9 a.m. And we are adjourned at 10:05.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Rest of the day and rest of the week.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.